Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Why Music Podcast, the podcast where we explore different musicians and their music throughout history. Today we're going to be learning about one of the pioneers or one of the most influential people in hip-hop history, none other than DJ Kool Herc. So when you think of hip-hop, who do you automatically think about? Let me guess, someone like J. Cole, for example, or Cardi B, perhaps 2 Chainz or even Drake. But when you think about old school hip-hop, who do you think about? Maybe you think about someone like LL Cool J, or Queen Latifah, or the Wu-Tang Clan, for example. But before any of these artists were even out of elementary school in some cases, there was DJ Kool Herc. So when we usually talk about the pioneers of hip-hop, if you ever heard discussions about how hip-hop started, 3 names usually come up, and those are the names of Afrika Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, and DJ Kool Herc. What's really interesting actually is that even though we know that hip-hop originated from America, only one of those 3 guys were actually born in America. As I'm sure you might have guessed already, DJ Kool Herc wasn't actually his real name. His real name was Clive Campbell, and he was born in Kingston, which is the capital of an island in the Caribbean called Jamaica, in 1955. He and his family moved to the Bronx, which is in New York, when he was 13 years old. So maybe some of you can really identify and understand what it's like to move from one country to another when you're 10, 11, 12 years old perhaps, or maybe even younger. And the same was true for DJ Kool Herc. It wasn't always easy, and he even said himself that his accent made it a bit difficult sometimes for people to understand him. But even though that was the case, he soon got involved in the music industry and the dance scene that was really becoming bigger and bigger in New York at that time. So one example of how important DJ Kool Herc is to the music industry in general and to hip-hop specifically is the fact that when you think about a DJ, it's really hard to imagine them using only one turntable, right? Well, DJ Kool Herc started to use 2, which meant that he could mix the end of one record straight into another one without having an awkward gap where you had to pull the record off the turntable, put another one on, and then find the right place and put the needle down and let the music play. He started to DJ with a genre of music called funk, which at the time, remember, this is in the late 1960s, early 1970s, was becoming really, really popular. And one of the main artists that he would use was a man called James Brown, who I think we'll probably have to talk about another time. Someone who you might also know as the godfather of soul. So before we get on to one of the most important events in not only hip-hop history, but to be honest, in music history, I just had a thought. How do you think his life and actually music in general would have turned out if DJ Kool Herc hadn't moved with his family from Kingston, Jamaica to New York? What if he had moved to somewhere in South Carolina, for example? What if he never left the island of Jamaica? How do you think that would have affected music today? So here we go, one of the most important events in music history. And it starts with an older sister. DJ Kool Herc had an older sister called Cindy, and she decided to throw a party so that she could raise some money to get some clothes so that when she went back to school, she'd be looking good, she'd be looking fresh. So she asked her little brother to DJ at the party for her. And it was there at 1520 Cedric Avenue on the 11th of August 1973 that many people to this day say that that's when hip-hop was born. So DJ Kool Herc started to DJ more and more and more. And because he was also a dancer, there were certain things that he automatically knew that dancers liked. And he started to observe certain things. He started to see that people usually enjoyed certain parts of a song much more than others, especially when the parts of the song would break down and you could only hear instruments. And usually not just any instruments, but these parts would be drums and maybe horns, but very, very, very heavily based around the drums. These parts of a song became known as the breaks, and he developed a technique called the MerryGoRound, where he would isolate the break from one record and mix it into the break from another record and keep that going and going and going. Let's actually hear how it went from the man himself.
One night, I'm waiting for the record to play out. I said, I wonder if I put that to myself. I said, if they're waiting for this particular break and I have a couple more records that's got the same breakup in it, I wonder how would it be if I put them all together. And I told them, I said, I'm going to try something new tonight. I'm going to call it a MerryGoRound.
Herc's MerryGoRound meant that instead of playing whole records, he would play just the instrumental breaks, mixing between them to create a continuous dance rhythm.
I started out with James Brown, clap your hand, stomp your feet. That part right there, when the break, boom, I had to come in with bongo rock. Bongo rock was still no vocals in it. Then I would go into Baby Huey, the Mexican. And it was like, whoa, I think we got some hit, because people was like, oh, whoa. Everybody was like, yeah, I'm feeling this. Oh, yeah.
So what you heard might not sound so special, but we have to remember that this is the first time anyone had ever done anything like this before. And not only was DJ Kool Herc doing this, but he also helped to coin the phrase breakdancer. Like I said before, the breaks were the part of the song that people usually like to dance to the most. And so when you combine those two, you get breakdancer and you get b-boys and b-girls, and this is another part of the legacy of DJ Kool Herc. So I think hearing about his life and hearing about what he was able to do, it's no wonder that these days when people talk about hip-hop and the pioneers of hip-hop, DJ Kool Herc is often called the father of hip-hop. Because without him, and possibly without his sister's party, we might never have heard of many of the artists that we know and love today. So, as usual, I have a few questions for you. Question 1. Have a listen to James Brown's Give It Up or Turn It Loose. If you were going to create a break, which part would you use? Okay, admittedly, question number 2 is less of a question and more of an activity. So if you have some time, jump on Spotify or YouTube and search for some music from the 1970s. It doesn't matter. It can be funk, disco, jazz, rock and roll, pop, punk, it doesn't matter. Have a listen to some music and see if you can hear any instrumental breaks. If you find any cool ones, why not share them with your friends? Because you never know, maybe you might hear something that might inspire you to become a pioneer of another genre of music. So before we go, I have an interesting fact for you.
Tell me something good.
How much do you think it cost to get into the party which started hip hop? What do you think? $10? $15? $20? Not even close. To get into the party where hip hop was born, it cost 25 cents for girls and 50 cents for guys. Can you imagine? 25 cents or 50 cents to be a part of history. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned something as well. Tune in next time for not just one special guest, but 2 special guests in our final Black History Month podcast. So until next time, like, share and subscribe to this podcast. Listen to some great music. Please take care of yourselves out there and peace.